Glendale to 15900.
HP.
Glendale to 15900.
The best basketball team.
Glendale to 15900.
Highland Park Athletics.
Glendale to 15900.
Man, I lost. I was happy.
Welcome everybody to Glendale to 15900 Highland Park's Athletic Sports Podcast. We just here, like I said, let you know that we here to bring you guys some historical perspective on Highland Park Athletics. Today we entrenched in football, and we're gonna let you guys know as much history about Highland Park football as we possibly can. All right, and to my right, Eric Reed is gonna give you a brief intro and introduce our guests.
Thank you, Sid. So again, this is the second of the live podcast. We had the pleasure of being here at the Northwest Activity Center a couple of months ago to reflect on some of the legends of Highland Park high school basketball. And today we wanted to have an interactive discussion to talk about our favorite sport, football. And so we're pleased also to have Vaughn Brown joining us here on the panel. We do have some folks that are joining us via Zoom, and so we want to thank you all for joining us as well. The format today, we hope, will be, again, interactive, and we really want to have a discussion around who are some of the impact football players, some of the impact coaches, as well as some of the teams that stood out from the era of Highland Park football. And so today, our goal is to drop some statistics and kick some realistic said around who was impactful from the 1960s through the 2000s. And so what I want to do is I want to begin just with a few statistics. And just doing a little bit of homework, I went back and I looked at some of the records from the 1970s through 2014. And so covering a 44-year period, we had 14 seasons of where our Highland Park teams had a winning percentage of at least 70%. Amazingly, out of the 44 years, only 8 teams made the playoffs. And I have to give kudos to Sid. The majority of those teams, I believe 7 of those 8 teams were teams that he led as head coach. I found one undefeated season, which was 1976. That team went 7-0. And when we looked at win percentages, because we have ongoing conversations around what was the best decade of Highland Park football, from 2000 to 2010, that decade had the highest winning percentage of 68.3%. The decade of 1970 to 1980, those teams had a cumulative winning percentage of 63%. And then the era that we played in during the 1980s through to 1990 came in third with a 60% win percentage. So just kind of wanted to open things up just from a total team and a decade perspective, just wanted to share some data as we start to get into our conversation. And so we're going to begin with the big fellas. We're going to talk about the guys that make it happen in the trenches on the offensive side of the ball, offensive linemen. And so we'll open it up just to talk about who were some of the impact players.
Opportunity to talk about the big boys. My offensive line coach, Winfrey Cadell, not here today, so I'm gonna try to represent him as well as I can. But he loves talking about the big boys do it better. So we're gonna talk about a couple of impact offensive linemen that impacted me, far as being a young kid coming up, and also was coached by. So I happen to be coached by 2 of Highland Park's all-time great offensive linemen, and Greg Croxton and Alvin Wells. And their coaching styles were different. And anybody that know Coach Croxton and Coach Wells know, Coach Croxton was laid back, He's gonna give you, he's gonna make sure you technique savvy, blah, 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 and make sure you understand all the calls and all that good stuff. And he's gonna be, directly in your face and right there. But, Alvin Wells is gonna come from the grit, the dirt. He might kick you, he might kick you. He might grab your face mask, twist your helmet out, throw your helmet at you. All those good things that got you motivated to play football.
That's where you learned that from?
Oh yeah, that's where I got that from. That's where I got that from. That cool, calm side, Coach Croxton. That's Coach Croxton. But I'm gonna cut you out, let my teeth fall out. That's Alvin Webb. But I like to, shoot those two guys out as also they being coaches at Highland Park, but also outstanding football players as well. And we go to other outstanding offensive linemen that want to give a little shout out to is Mark Williams, the class of 1985,
I believe.
if I'm not mistaken. Mark Williams, class of '85, left tackle. Started off 4 years beside me. Me and him started together as Mark was my left tackle. We're going to talk about Sean Hendricks, another 4-year guy. Charlie Suber, Ambrose Hood, Gerard Trice, Bradford Cross, Kenneth Widget, Edmund Goodwin, Jerome Turner, Zach Powell, Gary Wells, Marcel Reeves, and Eric Martin.
Keith
Also,
Benjamin.
Keith, thank you. Big Daddy Keith, Big Lomas as we called him, and may he rest in peace. Big Lomas was one of our definitely dominant big boys, but I was going to talk about Keith on the defensive side of the ball because he had his own defense named after him. So, Von he a little anxious. He want to make sure he get his guys in.
That's my
but we
guy.
gonna talk about the '90s and let him flow on that. But Big Keith, since Von got me there, Big Keith was our offensive defense lineman, and we had a specialized defense we called basic low just for Keith, so he could roam the inside A gaps and do the big fella do what he do. We also want to talk about Coach Adele and his centers. So we want to make a little small segment right here just for the centers. And some of our all-time great centers was Winford Cadell, Charlie Suber, Jerome Turner, Zach Powell. Did I miss a '90s guy at center? I don't think I did.
Well, he wasn't a predominantly offensive lineman, but he would play anywhere that needed to be played, and that was Deshaun Harshar. If you need him at center, he would play center. If you need him at fullback, he'll play fullback. He would play anywhere.
That's our Swiss Army knife on that '93 team.
Yep, 93.
93 team. All right, and those are just a quick shout outs for the big boys, and I want to let them know, hey, how appreciated they are in the whole grand scheme of things. Because like I said, if you ain't got no blocking up front, we can't talk about our great tailbacks.
Absolutely.
Of the past. All right.
But I mean, so Sid, and thank you, Sid, and thank you, Vaughn. And Sid did mention Winford Cadell, AKA Blue Devil, who was my offensive center during my senior year in high school. But we definitely got to mention the guy sitting right next to me, Cedric Dortch, is one of the all-time greats. Helped open the way, made life easy for me as a running back and others, and also went on to be all-conference as well as all-state. And so Ced is right up there with when we mention the great offensive lineman in Highland Park history. We talked a little bit, most of the guys on this list are from the 70s and going forward, but we also had some conversation around folks like Norris Dawson, who played in the 60s, as well as Reggie McKenzie, who is an all-time great. So we definitely have to, just make special recognition of those guys as well. Anything else regarding the big fellas?
Well, you should be big. They had the block for you. You better get yourself together. But I named your guys anyway, so it
Yeah,
don't matter.
we had some good guys up front. And one thing about big fellas, you better treat them right. You know, treat them right in the lunchroom, in the hallway, whatever. You gotta make sure they comfortable anytime in the locker room, because when you get out on that field, they're gonna make sure they your protectors.
Absolutely.
Vine, we take your French fries. I'm sorry, big boys like taking French fries from running back. So Vine probably got his French fries took a couple of times. Can't say nothing though.
I just make you go get me a Willie burger.
I know that's right. Hamilton and Davidson. So we're gonna jump to our next focus is gonna be on the defensive side of the ball. And what we decided to do, instead of being specific on who's the best at a specific position on defense, we just wanted to talk about who are some of the best defensive players, period, regardless of position, during the eras that we played and both before and after.
We're gonna let Vaughn start off. Vaughn's early 90s, so we're gonna let him start off with that.
First person that come to mind for me when you say defense, I'm gonna say Terrence Reed. Could play safety, cornerback, strong, fast, all over the place. Also, defensive side, we had, like you said, Eric Martin, 4-year varsity player, defensive end. I want to say my whole defense, my junior season, in which we were 8-1, did not make the state playoffs because we went by a point system. Probably had like the points given up, probably number 3 in the state that year. And that was what, 94, 95 season. It was looked like poetry in motion. Sid was part of that coaching staff. And that was, that was a great defense that I think of.
Yep, and to piggyback off of that, we talk about great defensive guys in that 90s concept, in that 90s era. Also want to mention the Lewis man that with all the heart. And when you're talking about little guys playing, playing big, was Little Hackshaw.
Yeah, Sean Harshaw.
Little Hackshaw, may rest in peace. Was a very tough ball player for Highland Park. Represented Highland Park on that gridiron extremely well. Not to mention, like in the early 90s and late 90s part of it, we also had great defenders. One of the top cornerbacks was Clarence Moore. May he rest in peace. Was an excellent defender and a shutdown corner as well. Clarence Price pressured many quarterback and wreaked havoc in the backfield for tackles for losses and multiple games as well. We also want to talk about in that 90s realm, this Game of Things coach coming out with late 90s in there. We saying, want to make sure I got his name right because I didn't have his name wrote down right here. Greer. What's Greer first name?
John Greer.
John Greer was another quick DT for us. As I was quick off the ball, him and Price complemented each other extremely well. And from that 90s aspect of it, Eric, that's what we got right now.
You forget early 90s, 91 defensive team had who was that? Keith McKenzie.
Keith and Sam. Jamal, I'm sorry.
Jamal Bell, Aristotle Wilson, Cleveland Everhart, Glennie Dash, Carmine Armstrong. I mean, all guys went on to play Division I football. on one defense.
And that was
It's awesome.
the year before I got there. So those guys are in the early 90s. And we want to make sure we appreciate that early 90s group as well. From defense, get guys that play defense stand out in the early 90s, mid 90s. All right.
So let's go a little bit earlier, and thank you, Vaughn. Let's talk about some of the guys from the 70s and the 80s who were impact players. And I had just a few guys, Keith Gilmore,
Inside linebacker.
Terry Grasty.
Inside
I
linebacker.
was a young buck back then, but I remember seeing Terry play. Guys like Anthony Gaines, obviously Doug Holly, who went on to be an All-American and played at SMU. Keith Smith, Dale Hardin, guys from the 70s, Milton Hall, Lester Threet. So I know the Threet family, but I didn't know that I always thought of them more on the basketball court than being dominant on the football court. But one of the names that was shared with me was Lester Threet. Vaughn mentioned Terry Reed, and Terry was an awesome player. I believe Terry and my younger brother, Vincent Madison, played on the same squad.
Yeah,
And,
I forgot all about
some
Vince.
athletic guys for sure.
Vince was at safety when both them at safeties. Don't throw it over top because it's gonna get intercepted.
Sid, did you have any other gentlemen, players that you wanted to highlight?
Oh, not the 70s, because that's, like you said, that I can think of, offhand, so we can move on to the next.
So, and even in going into the 80s, guys like Neil Simpson, who went on to play at the University of Michigan, and one of the more impactful guys that played on the defensive side when I played and when we played together, Andre Smoot at safety. He was a two-sport athlete, not only excelled at safety, but also at track and field. I believe he made All-State our senior year in track and field. So those are a couple of names that immediately came to mind during my time.
Now, impact defensive players in the 80s, you can't leave out Lanier Payton.
Absolutely.
Definitely went on here to get a scholarship at Michigan State. When you talk about defensive players, Lanier was definitely at the top of the charts. Also, you got defensive players impact on the defensive side of the ball. In the 80s, we got our very own that's here right now. It wasn't a quicker nose guard to me. And he followed that long list of great Highland Park nose guards. When you're talking about Skip Dillard and Michael Hall, then here comes Jonathan Miller.
Johnny.
Built in that same mold, quick, fast, off the ball, aggressive, tenacious, all those good things you want in your nose guard, and he just flat out wreaked havoc.
Yeah. Gator center is in the guard's hell.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Brian Davenport comes to mind.
In the 80s at
Big
the DT,
Dab in the
yeah,
80s.
Big Dab.
Class
Definitely.
of 1983. And Dab was a big fella, but he could run. Very athletic for his size, 280, 270, 280.
Extremely
but was
athletic.
right on his feet, could get down the line, and didn't have to take him off the field at all, in any situations.
Extremely athletic for a big fella.
Next, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about coaches. And I know one of the shocking things to me, again, just in prepping for us coming together today, was over the period of, from the late 60s through the mid-2000s, we only had like 6 or 7, maybe 8 coaches during that entire time. And
Six.
So we do want to lift them up, and we want to talk about a little bit about those coaches and their impact on Highland Park football.
We can start with the 60s. I'm not quite familiar, with Coach Rowe. I know that Norris Dawson talked about Coach Rowe, and his impact on him as a football player. And then we get into the 70s, we want to talk about the late, great James Bobbitt, who coached up that, our 70s, us men in the 70s for 1970. I think his last year was 77, 78, his 77 year. So he took over the late 60s and coached till 77. He also, in that span, produced Highland Park's first undefeated season, as that team of 1977 went 7-0. And then we get into that 80s era. We all had Coach Hampton, who took over in 78 all the way up to 88, the 87, 88 season. Yep, so we had the pleasure of having Coach Hampton and what we call the era of just sweet. We just was sweet. Whatever Coach Hampton got us, it was always state of the art. And, that era of football for us was special.
Yeah, he was.
And then we come into our early 90s phase here with Vaughn, and he had that mixture of
Coach Moulton, Coach Moulton, Coach Uran, rest in peace, Coach, both of them, rest in peace, both coaches.
Yes.
Both was great guys, real hands-on with their players, interacted. You can go to them at any time about anything. And I want to say, even under that staff, under that coaching, them coaches, their assistant coaches was really big brothers, uncles, father figures to our team. After games, weekends at the Dortch house. Just always, and that's where we going now. Once you ran, I graduated. You ran, gave it up, passed the torch to the captain, and the captain brought us home.
Definitely took it and ran with it.
And like Vaughn said, from being under Coach Uran and Coach Moulton, just establishing a different kind of bond with the players, from a different aspect, and getting to understand, at that time our youth, and what type of era we was in, and how to interact with our players. It was it was a learning experience for me. It was definitely a great time, in my coaching career, and from that point there, I want to talk about that. I had took over for Coach Uran in 1995, 96 season coming up, 95, 96, 96, 97, and I wanted to make sure, like I said, I talked about the impact of coaches. And the different programs that helped me be successful. So, I'm going to talk about a couple of coaches that were under me that unfortunately passed away. And, one of the main, these were main clauses in our growth and our success at Highland Park. And one was James Pollard Sr.
Absolutely.
was definitely one of my, to me, inspirations, and as far as learning from and picking his brain about certain things and how to deal and how to interact with players and how he, went about things with with our lower level talent, and our lower level kids, and that was huge for the program as well. Also, I wanted to talk about. Don't get twisted up. Coach Smitty. Coach Smitty was another one that was, may rest in peace, huge in my Nate 2000 teams coming up, because Coach Smith had his hand in the pulse of the youth as well. and doing good things with our kids and making sure that they were taken care of in aspects that, you know, only he could. So, you know, I wanted to make sure I recognized him as well. And also Coach Flagg with James Diener. And I wanted to make sure, you know, to let people know that having great coaches around and having them impact the youth and you know, having those kids from that era, and if you see them now, they all productive young men doing, you know, doing great things in their community. And some of them are actually coaching now as well. Yeah. Some of them have their own businesses. They doing
Making the impact.
excellent.
Yes.
And I want to take that time to say thanks, you know, to all my assistant coaches, and you know, Coach Blue, Coach Fogel, Coach Drain, and Coach Pinkett down at the lower levels, Coach White over at St. Ben's. We had, at one point, we had 4 separate teams, youth football teams, practicing at Highland Park. And, you know, being able to get those guys all to come together and play as one unit when they got to high school was huge for our success.
Yeah, thank you, Sid. And you mentioned Coach Pollard. He was on the staff when Hap was our head coach, and Pollard was fiery.
Most
But
definitely.
Pollard, you know, he loved on the kids. You could always go to him, you know, regardless of the level of energy. When we got on the field, it was time to strap him up. But you know, he was gentle off the field, and he was a mentor for a lot of our players during my time. And of course, Nate Hampton was the head coach during my era. I can't thank him enough for everything that he did, you know, not only for the football program, but just on a personal level, and helping me to stay on the right path, and, you know, helping me get a scholarship to college. And, you know, my life would be different if he wasn't a part of it.
Most definitely.
But I definitely want to, we talk about a lot of coaches, and again, this guy sitting next to my left, and I just want to kind of read off some of the records of the seasons that he had. And I'm looking at when you first took over, it was a little bit rocky. I see a 3-6 and a 2-7, but then you go 2001, 7-3, make the playoffs. 2002, 8-3, make the playoffs. 2003, 7-2, make the playoffs. 2004, 8-3. Then 2005, 12-1, and 2006, 11-2. We never had that level of consistency on the football field in terms of wins and losses. And again, besides just the records and taking Highland Park football to a different level, I mean, we were having tailgates when Sid was coaching his teams. Folks wanted to come out at night to be at the football field to see the games. But the impact that you made in terms of grooming others to take over after you, and like you said, even the young men who play for you, seeing all the good things, like this brother over here, Ian, seeing all the good things that they're doing in their lives is a testament to you as a coach. And so I wanted to make sure that I lifted that up while we're on this podcast today.
And I want to piggyback off one thing too, E. In that early 2000 when we first made the playoffs and things like that, I do want to mention a set of coaches that I had that came in, that was brought in by the late Fletcher Miller, and I want to acknowledge Mansfield Dinkins Sr. and Mansfield Dinkins Jr. and that crew that came in and helped establish a winning culture at Highland Park as well, and they were critical. And the youngest Dinkin, which played for me, right. Brandon, is also one of our better defensive linemen. But that was a different. He come into the 2000s era. He was one of our, like you talking about a Swiss Army knife. He played quarterback. He played linebacker. He could play outside backer. He could play receiver. He could play. He played the tailback position. Brandon did everything, you know, asked of him on the football field, and was one of my first all-staters as we grew into, you know, a winning culture at Highland Park.
Sweet, sweet, good stuff. Anything else, Vaughn, that you want to add in terms of coaching impact?
Yeah, like said, under you, you had more coaches than you had on staff. Something you don't know, but you do know. The way the community rallied, came to you, came around. Kids could be walking home from school after practice. You had the community watching them. And don't do nothing stupid. You already know. And in school, out of school, period. Regardless, all your kids that you had, you brought a community together. You changed a basketball school to a football school. And that's what
I echo
what
that.
it started being known as.
And I, like I said, I appreciate that. And like I said, without the community, you know, looking out for our young men, you know, it was huge to see, you know, people back in the stands that, you know, I had watched that I hadn't seen for years. And that was quite gratifying to see the stands and look in the stands and see former athletes and former, you know, student body in the stands supporting our young men as we tried to accomplish a goal that we had set out, you know, to win a state title, and we tried, and I appreciate our young men for all the effort they put in. And then you know, I can segue this little moment right here with my quarterback, who is the winningest quarterback in Highland Park history. It's hands down. You know, nobody eclipsed 33 wins. He's 33-10 as a starter at Highland Park, and multiple 300-yard plus games. It wasn't just handing the ball off. I asked Ian to do a lot as a freshman, and then he just grew into that role. And you know, we had to throw the ball in, you know, prepared, you know, no huddle offenses, things like that. And Ian picked it up and thrived. And like I said, he produced multiple 300-yard games, multiple double-digit touchdown games, and that young man played that quarterback position, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, right. I had a chance before our last podcast to go back and look at some film during the time that Ian was quarterbacking, and yeah, brother, you was slinging it. Yeah, we didn't have that during our time.
3 yards in a cloud of dust.
That's right. So the last positional topic that we had on our agenda, and we purposely saved it for last, was the running backs.
Uh-oh.
And we saved this for last because more than anything else that's talked about that I'm aware of around Highland Park football is who were the best running backs. And we run into guys, whether it's, you know, in a grocery store or whether it's at the Woodward Bar and Grill. I got a guy who hangs out in the Southfield area, and he claims he had the record for rushing yardage in Highland Park history. So we're about to have this conversation real quick on not necessarily who was the best, but who were the impact running backs in Highland Park football history. And I can say that there were a large number. So I'm gonna let the coach start it off.
I can't go back that far. Now, I'm not sure about the backs in the '60s, so I can't talk about that. But like I said, you know, as a kid growing up, you know, the number one back that was talked about when I was a kid, and even now as a coach, they say, you know, in that '70s era was Arthur Drain. And they say Arthur Drain one of the coldest backs to ever play and lace them up at Highland Park. So that's the story. I mean, I wasn't there. That's the story, you know, that I get from most of the majority of the guys that, you know, watched Highland Park there and grew up in that era, played in that era. My own brothers tell me that Arthur Drain was a hell of a back. And, you know, and that's my homage to the 70s. So I let, they also tell me that Michael Pinkett, great back.
Mike
Sanchez brothers, great backs. Not Mike Morgan and his brother
Max
Morgan, great running backs. Not to take anything away from them. Zennis came in late '80s. Stan was a Stan Costin fullback, different positions, but also impact backs, as they say,
So,
in Highland Park in the '70s.
so Zennis Holmes, 79, 80.
79, 80.
Zennis was an impact,
Yep.
impact back. The one thing that I was 13, 14 during that time, but he had like the biggest calf muscle I'd ever seen on a
little
football
guy.
player.
Yep,
I mean,
yep.
for his size, but he was powerful, he was shifty, and he definitely was an impact back. You mentioned Mike Pinkett, and thank you, Sid, and Max Morgan, Mike Morgan, Arthur Drain. You mentioned Sanchez. I had down Thomas Sanchez. Wayne shared with me Wayne Withers from the 70s. But are there any others that we might be missing? And I know that's before your time, Vaughn, so I don't know how much you have to chime in about the running backs of the 70s.
He had to ask Papa Brown about that.
Okay.
But as I can think of and go back and just what you call barbershop talk, all that type of thing, those were the backs that was mentioned the most.
Yeah.
In the '70s. So that's what we had.
Yeah. And I think Arthur Drain, like you said,
Arthur,
it's almost
the
seems
decade
like a
of the 70s,
consensus that when most folks talk about the 70s, at least for me, that's the first name that comes up.
That's the first thing that comes.
So whether or not he was the best, that's the name that always is first out of folks' mouths when they talk about running backs during that time.
They talk Arthur Drain. So we can go in. Was that the '80s?
Talk about the 1980s. The guy who stood out for me during my time, and I had the opportunity to, actually two guys, Terry Lewis. Terry was a two-way impact player at Highland Park, three-sport guy, football, basketball, track and field. Terry went on to play at Michigan State University, but he was definitely an impact tailback during our time. He graduated in 1981, and then the next year, Carl Wilson, Carl Outlaw. I had the opportunity to actually play fullback and block for both of those guys. So Terry graduated 81, then followed by Carl Wilson, and Carl was dynamic. I don't recall Carl playing on the defensive side. I think he was strictly a running back, but Carl was shifty. Carl could catch the ball out of the backfield. Carl was strong, and so it was an honor for me to block for them, and then after they both graduated to, kind of be the next person in line after them.
Yeah, you mentioned those. Those three backs he said in the early '80s. I'm talking to my brother right now who like to talk trash in the stands. I'm talking. What's the common denominator? Who blocking for them? That's breakaway back right there. We ain't gonna talk about nothing else. That's Marshall Falk. That Marshall Falk guy. That's Marshall Falk in 1983. Okay. You wasn't gonna get no touches. So also to piggyback now off Eric, we were talking about backs of the '80s. We got may rest in peace. We got to talk about Keith Arrington, who was a total
Yes.
impact back at Highland Park. Life taken away too soon, but definitely an impact back in Highland Park. And when we talk about Bill Jones,
Bill Jones, yes.
Bill Jones, ended up being a different thing there. I personally played with Bill Jones, and I know how good a back Bill was, and just sometimes you get too many great backs at the same time, and so hey, sometimes you got to figure out how to get them both that football, but back there in Highland Park, we were Pacific positions, and the tailback got that, and he got that rock the most, and that's how that went. And I want to talk about 88, 89, 90, 80s, and that.
Aristotle was in that
Aristotle, we talking about
Aristotle was-
Aristotle. We talking about
It was 91.
yeah, the other big.
Aristotle, Jamal,
Yeah,
Bell,
We got the other big boy,
Lynn Donaldson.
80 Donaldson, and then my wife graduated with the other big back that played opposite Arrington before he passed away, and I don't know why the name on the tip of my tongue. It'll come to me. Say it again, baby. Your classmate? It'll come to me. But we moved on to the 90s as Von can attest, early 90s backs.
We still have, rest in peace, Sam Bell. Got Andre Crosby, Darrell Watkins.
Did you say Darrell Watkins?
No, that's my that's
I
my
hope
guy.
Darrell Watkins listening.
That's that's my guy. But and it was just through my time in Highland Park, it was wait your turn.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait your turn. You play, you do everything else, and when that time comes, you just got to be ready.
I had the pleasure of watching my younger brother, I mentioned his name
Oh, yeah,
earlier,
Vincent
Vincent
was-
Madison. He had one season, I think, at tailback. First of all, the offense was kind of, the quarterback was the running back thing. It was almost similar to what Robichaud was doing with Tyrone Wheatley. And he had an amazing season. I had a chance to, see him in person, but then a few years later, I came across some highlight tapes, and I watched the tapes, and he was doing some incredible stuff. And Vince wasn't even really a football guy. He was more interested in basketball, but that one
Extremely
season,
talented,
yeah, he turned it out. That one season, I think in 92, 93.
92, that
92,
first playoff
92,
year.
93 season.
Very talented back. And then as you move on, and we go into, the later 90s, we had one guy that studs out, as I started coaching my early coaching days, and I had him for 3 years. And his, may rest in peace, is Clarence Moore. Clarence Moore is one of the guys, you had to be there to see this kid play. When we talk about athletic at the tailback position, the kid can do everything. Now, when I talk about a kid scoring 5 touchdowns, 5 different ways, we talking about an athlete. Whether he returned the kick, he returned the punt, he returned kickoff, he returned the punt, he returned a fake punt, picked off a pass, ran one in. I'm sorry, he had 6 touchdowns that day because he caught a pass as well for a touchdown.
Wow.
Put on a complete show. And Clarence Moore is, like I said, one of the most athletic kids I've ever coached. And that segue to us into the 2000s.
Well, I mean, when you say 6 touchdowns, I mean, it don't get much better than that.
That kid scored every way possible.
It's awesome.
Every way possible. Then, like I say, now we get into our running backs of the 2000s and that early stage. You know, something about Highland Park, we're going to keep backs. We're going to keep a tailback. And then we're going to keep explosive backs.
Yes.
So, you know, in my first year of, you know, getting to the playoffs, starting out, we started off 6-0 and made it to the playoffs that year. We had backs, and how can I explain this? I got to explain it, you know, when you got a back with just sweet feet. You know, he just when he got the ball, he just like he glide. So that was my guy, Dennis Stepter. Dennis Stepter. Early 2000s. Now he was on my first playoff team, and then the next year he was on the team that actually won the first state playoff game.
Gotcha.
So Dennis Stepter and Michael Dunwitty.
Yep.
When I tell you about this kid Dunwitty, if he has a step on the edge of your defense, you might as well put a check mark by it, because it's over. Oh, you better make sure you contain it. But if you had a step,
yeah, he could go.
anybody out of you break containment, anybody out of containment, give up that containment, you chalk that up. Those two backs right there, along with when I was telling you about Brandon Dinkins, made up my backfield. And when you talk about explosiveness, put up some points that year as well in 2000. So the early 2000s, we started gradually getting better and better. And like I said, we tipped the scale. It was a year before Ian got there. And then, you know, so I was impacted with just a bunch of, you know, athletes, talented athletes, all from a sophomore class where when you talk about what I consider in Highland Park history right now, the best back to ever come out of Highland Park, and it was a 6 foot, 215
I got his name right here.
pound tailback named Darius Johnson. I can only talk about, you know, I don't have the stats from Arthur Drain. I don't know what Arthur Drain's stats were. I don't know what Max Morgan's stats were, but I can tell you this kid's stats, okay? When you rush for 5,900 yards and 72 touchdowns, what can I say? Did I short him? I don't know either. But I know as a sophomore, he had the all-time record with 375 yards in one game. 375, I don't know who broke that. I don't know, because they broke it. He had to break it when I wasn't around. But when you talk about 300, and you want to say out in Melvindale, 375 yards as a sophomore. Chalk it up.
So you mentioned a lot of running backs.
A lot of running backs. They ain't got that stat line.
He stood out to me, and I had his name down and circled from the era, definitely when you coached. He was amazing.
I can only talk about mine and who I coach. But I ain't gonna, in that same backfield, I had another 1,000-yard wingback named Anthony Jones. So while he gained 2,000 yards a year, the other back is gaining 1,500 a year. Who? Somebody was giving him the ball, and somebody was giving him the ball.
Yes.
All I know is this. When you load it, you load it. Also had a utility that had, he was a utility back. Leon Lett would come in and what did they have? Almost 700 yards backup. This all in one backfield. So that one man in a cloud of dust, we ain't doing that. We open it up, we're gonna get our kids to football. And when you talk about backs, hey, now if I'd have gave any of those other two backs the ball, 200, tailbacks back then got about 250 times in the season, didn't it? That's all we did. Mm-hmm. What if I'd have gave those other backs the same amount of carries? So when you start talking about hypotheticals and you start telling me about your stats, when you touched the ball, you was 85% of the offense. Well, back then, who threw a pass? We didn't throw no passes, did we? So that was 95% of the offense. You're supposed to have 1,200 yards, as they say.
Right.
That argument, I'm going to put to rest about who the best back in Highland Park history is.
So you're going with,
And I got another great back here beside me, but he know those numbers out cold.
Those some numbers.
Those some out cold numbers.
Those some numbers.
And when he had a back that was with him, I can put up against any back in Highland Park.
who's that, Sid?
Dre. What can we say?
Yeah.
As they say, time evolves.
It's just a different era. Era of football, era of everything. Things change, things evolve. I'm proud of you.
Oh. What you learn? You don't repeat the same thing over and over again. You learn.
Yeah.
And you learn that you got talent all around. You get that talent to football.
That's right.
Get that talent to football. Everybody got an opportunity to shine. Everybody.
So I'm just looking at, just to make sure that I didn't miss anybody.
You didn't say nothing about the best back. Who you got?
The best back that I ever saw, I would have to give it up to Darius. He was the best running back that I saw during my time.
I'm waiting for some 70 guys to chime in because I get to hear that. Von, who you got?
Probably the best one I seen. Sam Bell had about 4,000 in 2 seasons. Didn't play his senior season. And with 1 playoff game. I mean, that's just me. I'm not taking nothing from Darius. That's my little bro. Y'all know that.
And you're entitled to your opinion. But when I line up and I pick in my squad,
Yeah.
I love Sam, but
Darius put in work. Your back's put in work.
taking that back. That's my guy.
Yeah.
That's my guy. Just like that's my guy, Jonathan Miller, sitting out there in the stands. We talking Highland Park football. We talking about one of the best nose guys that ever played the game.
No doubt.
One of the best nose guys I seen. When we want to wreak havoc, we talking about Jay Miller. A fool in the huddle. What we got
Nonstop.
next?
I think from a position standpoint, we covered everything.
From this and that, but you tell me everything. Now we can talk about what you said, teams, great teams. And this will be end our segment, guys. We can talk about some of the greater teams that played at Highland Park. And it's only a debate. Everybody else farther line. So we can do let's do the top 5 that we can see on there. But the main 2 teams are the 2 undefeated teams. The team in 2005 that went 9-0, and the 77 team that went 7-0. Then we got the 93 squad that missed the playoffs by a couple of points. That went 8-1.
Yeah.
And we got
93-94 team was 8-1.
Yep, and we also got that 2006 team that went 8-1 as well. So we got maybe 4 or 5 teams we could talk about in that area,
No, and
in those areas.
And again, we have to raise up to the first undefeated team, the 76 team.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though
definitely.
they didn't get a playoff berth, because it was just a different era in terms
Right,
of
and
how
I
you
don't
got
know.
into the
I don't know
playoffs
why
during that
they
time.
schedule was so short that year. Nobody can explain to me why their schedule was short. But they only played 7 games that year. I don't understand why. And I can't get an explanation like that because Bobby not here, so I don't know who else I would talk to about why it was only 7 games that year.
Right.
But that's the first undefeated team. Then the next one would be the 2005 team that's finished 12-1, but they finished the regular season 9-0, and that was the first 9-0 football team in Highland Park history.
Yeah.
And that was actually your freshman year, right, Ian? Ian's freshman year, put in work. And then we got the 1993, was that 93, Vaughn?
Yeah.
Or 94, 93,
The
94?
94, 95 team
94, 95 team
was 8-1.
that finished 8-1 and a couple of decimal points away from making the playoffs. And we also got that night, your brother's senior year team, Eric, that 92.
8-1.
Yep, that finished this year 8-1 the season, made it to the state playoffs.
Remember,
And,
if I
we
remember, I
lost-
think they lost to Romulus.
We lost to Romulus that year. Yep.
And a rainstorm. It was
Yeah.
nasty that night.
Yeah. Like I said, that wet field slowed down our speed. And
So again, when we talk about the eras, and I'm just kind of looking, just rehashing from when we opened up, we look in, the winningest era was the 2000s, with a 68% winning percentage, and that was significantly higher than any other decade that we have on record, even going back to the 1950s, that they had a 22% winning percentage. And then the next highest was the decade of the 70s with a 63% winning percentage.
okay.
So we should have won more, I know, than our year. Had some close calls, but lost 2 to 3 games each season.
Each season, yep, the 80s, 6-3, like 3 straight years.
Yep.
Somebody's on the our live feed. You got a question?
Just checking to see. No, they was just asking if we were muted, but no, we're not muted.
Who's Coach A,
Did
right?
anyone have, those are our notes. Did anyone that's online have any questions that you wanted us to share with the audience? And if they come through, we'll read those. So, but that, in terms of the identification of impactful players by position and coaches and teams, that kind of wraps things up. Sid, did you want to talk a little bit about what's coming forth for Glendale to 15900?
Yeah, Glendale 5900. We're gonna our next 2 scheduled shows. We gotta talk about the impact of the rec center, and we had a situation where we, came across a coach at the rec center that had won this first state title for the state of Michigan from the rec center at Hackett. And it, all these years I never knew that. It was never shared with us. It was just, and based on, all the information gathered, all the, the trophies and the plaques and stuff, that Coach Reg Potts was instrumental in Highland Park Rec Department, Hackett, as we call it, winning 2 state titles and going to 5 semifinal games. So we want to get a chance to talk to him and highlight him, and he will talk to us about his struggles of trying to, break through with the Highland Park Rec Department and get its recognition for being, an excellent mentor for, the youth of Highland Park at that time. And we also have, coming up in September, we have our women's basketball, and we want to make sure we get, that CAD schedule, and we have Boo Ruff on stage with us as well to talk about the women's basketball program in Highland Park. And that's all we have for the next 2 shows coming up. And then we'll get into other things quite soon.
Yeah. And we'll definitely make sure the 2 upcoming podcasts, we'll definitely make sure that information is posted on the podcast Facebook page.
Yep.
And we appreciate the folks that have joined us in the audience. We appreciate those that joined us via Zoom. We appreciate you, Vaughn, coming up to sit on stage with us to share some of your insights. And we look forward to doing this again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bob Brown, let's give him a little round of applause. I can't hear you.
Thanks,
Von
everybody.
Brown. Appreciate you, Von, stepping up, helping us navigate the 90s. All right. Eric, you got anything else?
We're good. Thank you, Sid, for all your insights as well. And again, to everyone who joined us, thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks to everybody.
Glendale to 15900.
AC,
Glendale to 15900.
the best basketball team.
Glendale to 15900.
Highland Park Athletic.
Glendale to 15900.
Man, I lost. How sexy.
Glendale to 15900.